graphic design is actually a very difficult discipline to explain to people because graphic design is not a thing unto itself. For example, it's not like architecture, it's not fashion. So when people ask us, what do you do? I say, okay, I'm a graphic designer. People say, oh, do you design ads? Yes, we do. Or people would go, do you design packaging? Yes, we do. Do you design logos? Yes, we do. But people see a little fragment of what the practice actually is. And this is the Google search result that says, graphic design is the art or skill of combining words and pictures. Is not kind of very flattering description, right? For advertisements, magazines, or books. Okay, so that's a kind of like really depressing, state of how people understand graphic design. But this image is really fantastic. I think that it explains graphic design extremely well. Why is that? Because the world, the planet, everything that you see is wrapped around by graphic design. So it's this kind of infrastructure that is actually everywhere. And there's something really profound about that, But nowadays, when people ask us, do you do branding? We say, yes, we do branding. Everybody then understands. Branding is a kind of really, I think, hot topic right now that people do understand what that is. But the term branding is somewhat new. It actually came about, I think, about 10 years ago. Previously, it was called identity design. And I think that in certain cultures and countries, people still like to think of branding or call branding as identity design. For example, in Germany, they like to call it CIS, Corporate Identity System. So these are, I think, very iconic logos and marks that you're all very familiar with, right? Mobile, USA Today, Uniqlo, so on and so forth. But what you didn't know is that the logos on the left were actually designed in the 50s, 60s, 70s, up until 80. And those on the right were actually designed in the past 10 years or so. So you can't really tell the formal differences unless I point it out to you. So the result of the work, the identities themselves actually have not changed that much. But what has changed is actually the process. How do you go from ideation to the final result? Right now, there's always a process called brand strategy that we have to go through, formerly known as just intelligent design. So as a point of reference, this is a logo that the famous graphic designer Paul Rand did for Steve Jobs for Next. So his presentation was basically 6 pages, literally 6 pages. And I'm going to go through this page by page. So he started out. First of all, he looked at the name. He said, your name is very generic, Next. There's nothing special about it. And also, it can actually be read as exit because the EXT is so pronounced here. So how can we actually solve this problem? How can we actually reduce the genericity and kind of create something that's very special, about these 4 letters? So what he recognizes that by making the E in lowercase, somehow it prevents the word from being read as exit, and it gives the word a kind of nuance. So he did several tests here just to see how the word actually reads. And then he kind of arrived at a conclusion that making this E lowercase is really the key to give your name and your identity some particular special quality. But ultimately, you're a technology company, right? So how do you actually suggest technology in the word mark itself? His conclusion was that it's a useless attempt to try to express technology or any whatever quality in the word mark itself. And then he illustrated, he used some other typeface. He said, here you go, it's actually a useless attempt. But your product itself is actually this black box. So how do we actually engage these 4 letters set in this particular sans serif typeface with your black box? And here you go, voila. That's the logo. And that was his entire presentation. So today, how do we do design? I'm sure we're all very familiar with the whole strategy process. Hundreds and hundreds of pages in PowerPoint trying to analyze the brand proposition, the value, and all of that. So this is sort of like the process that we go through today. However, what has not changed in the past 30 years is this thing called brand style guide that every art director, every graphic designer is obsessed with. What is that? After you create a really beautiful identity or brand system, you want to make sure that there's longevity to it and that it's implemented and executed very consistently. So style guide is something that basically outlines all the to-dos and don't-dos in a kind of a very, very maniacal, detailed way to kind of guide people. But my conclusion is that style guides are basically useless if the designers are not qualified to do the job. So what it comes down to is actually the people who are using the toolbox. It doesn't matter how you actually create a really detailed guideline. If people cannot actually do it, they cannot follow it, it's basically useless. So this is a project that I'm going to talk about that actually required a lot of non-graphic designers to actually work on the job because we had to turn them into graphic designers. And we did not create any kind of graphic guideline, but we had to make sure that there's a kind of consistency in the outcome of the work. So how do we do that? So the project was for the American Pavilion for the Venice Architecture Biennale, which is still happening here. So this year's curator is Rem Koolhaas. So this is a very interesting image that kind of illustrates his theme. So his theme is about absorbing modernity. It's how modernity in the past 100 years really kind of erased national characteristics, not only in architecture but in culture as well. And how does each country or culture respond to that? That was his whole thing. So I got a phone call from the curator for the American Pavilion. She's a good friend of mine. She said, "Hey, Natasha, it's a very important project, personal project for me. You gotta help me. I want to do this office. It's going to be an exhibition, but it's going to be a working office for 6 months on site." I said, "Okay." She said, "We want to call it Office US." And I said, "Okay, what is it? What is it about?" And then she said, "Okay, first of all, we want to deal with 100 years of U.S. architecture as exports. So first of all, 100 years, great. That's a lot to design." And then she said that we want to really kind of foreground and talk about 1,000 historical examples, meaning buildings. Okay, we didn't know in what kind of form or shape this particular work will be manifested. And then she said that, okay, this is going to be a working office, meaning that there will be fellows in the office working. So while she was describing all this, and this is really what was going through my head, seriously, 100 years to design, are you kidding me? 1,000 projects? I don't even care what it would be. It means that we don't have enough people to deal with. Seriously, it doesn't matter whether it's 1,000 books, whether it's 1,000 whatever, stickers. No, we don't have enough power to do that. But, and also working office, no way. It means that people are actually going to take our precious identity design system and fuck it up. Of course, we're always very professional, We say, great, yes, let's do it. All right, so after hanging up the phone, I was really like, we are screwed, big time. At that time, this was about like a year and a half ago, I had 4 designers on my team, plus myself. That was the entire labor force. So the first impulse was that, okay, we don't know what that 1,000 projects is going to be, but we know that we gotta turn all these researchers, students at MIT who are actually researching on the project. They're all architects, we gotta turn them into our workforce. We gotta make them work for us. Okay, so that was like the first impulse. So the question is that, how do we actually do that, right? How do we actually begin to design an identity system that can actually work for that? So we look at the fonts. Fonts is the ingredients, and typography is how you actually cook the ingredients. So we kind of look into system fonts, first of all. So you're probably very familiar with this missing font, warning. It's very, very annoying when fonts are not loaded on the computer. And we know that when people are annoyed, they're not going to work. So we're going to reduce and remove this problem for all. Therefore, our first steps is to look into system fonts. They're in all computers across different platforms, across Mac and PC. So we kind of pick these 2 typefaces, Arial and Times New Roman. So this is a kind of very geeky stuff, Arial is a typeface that's sort of based on the design of Helvetica, which is a quintessential modern typeface. And then there's Times New Roman, which is based on Times Roman, which was designed for the newspaper Times. It's known for its legibility, and Windows actually install it in every computer. So here you go, we got our logo, Office US, voila. Very simple. And then we kind of also understood that people don't follow any kind of Pantone chips. Don't even worry about Pantone, just black and white, everything. So this is our palette. Here we go. So because the kiddo parts is so incredibly simple, it's almost non-designed. We can actually create a system, and we can actually encourage exchange very, very easily. Oh, also, we kind of made assumption that if we really didn't know what to do, just put a logo on everything. So we actually did that. We designed that. That was very, very easy. Black and white logo everywhere. So one thing that we actually did design, it was very labor intensive, was one of these 4 books. And then we're still designing the series. So the first book is about the agenda. It's basically a survey of American architecture history in the last 100 years. And it's a kind of reader. So there are essays, for example, that's Hugh Hefner in his office. They're very incredibly beautiful photography by Ezra Stoller. So that's an SOM office in the 50s. Logos from all the participating U.S. offices in America. Timeline about the life and death of 100 U.S. architecture offices and the practices that they had overseas. Very intensive, a lot of infographics and diagrams about migration of European architects who went to America and then went back to Europe and built, how oil actually affects architecture, and also incinerators in Europe, designed and done by American architects. And then what else? Skyscrapers, of course. U.S. embassies being bombed by terrorists. This is a kind of text timeline that we had. And then housing complexes in Japan done by American architects. So we actually did all that ourselves. That had to be done by us with, a lot of graphic nuances. And we also did a lot of graphic systems there, posters, pretty much everything. But then what was very important is that 1,000 projects, where did they go? They actually went into a space wrapped around the whole pavilion. So there are basically 1,000 booklets. Each booklet was actually designed, the template was designed by us, as you can see. Very simple system. You put a picture here, you put a logo on top, on the left, and then just follow these type styles. And then we distributed the templates to the 30-something students at MIT and had them actually design all these books. So what we did was basically we collected the files, we made sure that nothing was messed up in the files, and then we sent them to print. So we didn't do anything. And then after the opening, we want to make sure that the people, the fellows who are working in the office could actually take our design and do something really, really great. So here we go. Now you can see they actually designed a website. Without me telling you, probably wouldn't even recognize that these are actually not done by us. There's a kind of really incredible consistency to it. And these are all done by these fellows, and they're still continuing to generate new graphics for their openings, for their activities, and we're very curious to actually collect all of them. So the conclusion is that, sometimes when we're under tremendous pressure and a lot of constraints on resources, we don't actually have the luxury to go through the typical process. We just only need to identify a couple of most important things and just go with them. Thank you.